Welcome back to episode 00.4 of the Recreatus podcast. We are here once again, but a slightly different crew this time. We are now joined not only by Casey, but Dance. Welcome,
Hello.
Dance. And Dance is going to tell us a little bit about 3 examples of digital heritage, kind of like we did last time.
All right, thank you. I have here a program called iHeritage that is put on by the European Union. They have 6 projects that they're currently working on: Egypt, Jordan, Sicily, Lebanon, Spain, and then they have a AR/VR Mediterranean diet cultural 3D world that they're doing here. The one I mainly looked into was the Jordanian one, which is at Petra. There is 25 scans that they've taken of different areas within their compound of Petra within there. And they have different ways that you can actually interact with it. They have a video game where you can digitally just walk around and take in the whole area virtually and just kind of see it. There's no extra information, it seems like, within the video game. But then they do have scans that have little buttons on different parts of buildings within Petra. And each one gives you a little bit more history and culture of that area or why it's important on that building, such as the double eagles on top of the treasury and why it's important. One of the other ones I found out there was a digital scan of a bunch of journals done by Samson Occam, or his writings. He was a indigenous founder of Dartmouth University, and in 2023 they returned all of the actual physical paperwork to the tribe that he was a part of, which is the Mohegan tribe. But the project started in 2005, starting the scans just so that the library could keep track of his historical writings and everything else along those lines. He has like names of indigenous people who attended Dartmouth University and how it was formed, and a bunch of his just journals getting that started, which is very interesting. Looking at these journals, I've read a few of them, very historical, very nice. The third one that I looked up was done on a forum of SketchUp. It's called Reconstruction of Medieval Nubian Church. It's done by Laverintos 17. It is this church was originally by Faras in Sudan, and it flooded down back in the medieval times. And he took one of these physical models made by the remains of the church and digitally rebuilt it into SketchUp and put it out onto a forum for everyone to look at. And he has several where you can actually see it being built, and then also just the actual scan from the outside walking around on it.
And so I think that last one definitely takes us into that conversation where I wanted to go today. Well, what do we mean by not just digital, but virtual? So whenever we are talking about virtual heritage, what is it that we're oftentimes referring to? Well, I gave you the longest, heads up of you've had since Monday to think about it.
This is true. Well, in my search of the internet, when I was looking at things for digital heritage and for virtual heritage, what I was really considering as the difference was the reconstruction aspect, or like the virtual reality touch to things. That was really what I was looking for, as opposed to just looking at digital logs of things. That's what I was like, okay, that was what I was categorizing as like the digital heritage aspect, solely digital heritage. And then when something was like, oh, we used virtual reality or we used AI to like do stuff with this, I'm like, okay, you're leaning more into virtual heritage.
Dr. Bergeron, do you have any thoughts on the idea of virtual? What makes something virtual?
So, well, I think that, and honestly, what I was just doing is going back and reviewing some of the definitions of virtual, right? So we see virtual as not reality, but almost is one of the definitions, and essentially like reality, but not physical. So again, there's lots of definitions out there and lots of discussions in the literature what we mean by virtual. But, when we say virtually, we mean we're almost there, like it's virtually complete, right? We use that term, or in virtual reality it's not a physical reality, but it is potentially a reality, right? And I think that's interesting. And so some of that, when we distinguish virtual heritage from digital heritage, all right, might be in the goals that we're trying to go for. So in the virtual sense, right, we are trying to create something that is almost a reality, and I keep saying almost, right, and that's intentional, right? Almost a reality, so we can sense it in similar ways, but it's not physical, and it's not maybe the one that we can see around us. And so it's a narrow focus on using digital technologies to achieve this, because you can sense something that's virtual without necessarily having that part around it. But that's kind of what we have seen as a way to get into a virtual reality. But certainly you could make that in your own mind. So sci-fi writers and others have talked about how you can read things that potentially can recreate that in your own mind. But I think interestingly, from your example stance, right, that kind of are a nice broad range of some of the applications we see in these areas, right? From the scans of the documents, this is what we kind of consider digital heritage. So there, the object is being turned into a digital form for access, for preservation, maybe. The first, what you referred to kind of as a video game-esque recreation of Petra, right? So that's the virtual reality. So it behaves like a reality, and we can move through it, we can navigate, we can experience it. And then we have some of the documentation end of it, in the sense that the Nubian church, right, through SketchUp, right, that's a way to essentially reproduce something in a digital environment, so that we can both document it, right, essentially preserve what its elements were like, and also maybe get some sense of experiencing it as well. So it's an interesting mix. And to come back to the kind of that virtual end of it, right, is that it's not physical reality, but it is something that we can see in the digital space and experience it.
Any thoughts beyond that in terms of what you think of as virtual, after you've given us your examples of digital and virtual?
And I mean, in my own opinion, I've always just seemed virtual kind of like with a distance thing, being there but not being there, just much like doing a Zoom meeting or something like that. It's virtual. That's always how I've always viewed it. So I kind of like looking at it, these places, like you're there but you're not really there, is kind of how I really like looking at it as a definition of virtual with these locations.
Mine would be representation of a thing,
yes,
as opposed to the thing itself, because we can go beyond. So that kind of wraps up this episode. But yeah, be sure to come back for our next conversation next month.